Welcome to my Bob Thurman podcast. I'm so grateful some good friends enabled me to present them to you. If you enjoy them and find them useful, please think of becoming a member of Tibet House US to help preserve Tibetan culture. Tibet House is the Dalai Lama's cultural center in America. All best wishes. Have a great day.
This is episode 271, Bliss and Buddhaverses.
And as I defined millennial or apocalyptic consciousness, post-millennial consciousness, it is a consciousness that at first we think it makes everything sort of completely automatically taken care of and leads to self-indulgence, which is why the Western civilization, or all authoritarian, Chinese too, all authoritarian civilizations have been afraid of it, Japanese too. There was one a splinter group of the Shingon school in Japan, Shingon order of Japanese Tantric Buddhism, that got involved with what the Tibetans call the unexcelled yoga tantras, where they have male-female union icons of the Buddha, Guhya Samaja and Chakrasambar, this kind of thing. And they were like rounded up and executed in the 17th century by the shoguns. So Japan too, not only Europe, was afraid of this notion of sort of post-millennial or apocalyptic consciousness. The idea that total fulfillment of all energies of the being could be possible in any time in the universe. And so as that's defined, once you have that, instead of leading just to self-indulgence, which maybe we first think, it actually leads to putting ourselves in a situation where there is no external excuse for not putting our full life's energy into the task of evolution, which is what is the meaning of our life from the Buddha's perspective. And this is debatable, we can argue about this. But the meaning of life. So we will a little bit work on that today. But I thought also I would read another section, begin with another thing from the Vimalakirti that I didn't read yesterday. And I would theme today's session on the Vimalakirti a little bit, because not just because I translated the Vimalakirti, but that helps because then I don't mind reading it. And I don't like Dharma translationese by a lot of people. I mean, I would improve this. This is not that good, but there's some nice things about it. But, in the first section of the Vimalakirti, in the first chapter, where before they have met Vimalakirti and all the people have come from the Vaishali city, like San Francisco, New York, whatever, big metropolis, to see Vimalakirti, and to see the Buddha, rather, out into the Amrapali grove. And when they do this thing where he first shows a kind of miracle, they make offerings of jeweled parasols to the Buddha. All of the middle-class people from Vaishali bring these jeweled parasols, and they offer them to him. And then they ask him the question of the sutra. They say, how does the Bodhisattva purify the Buddha land? How does the Bodhisattva, once having embarked toward unexcelled perfect enlightenment, how does that Bodhisattva purify the Buddha land? Which is a very different question than we usually think, where you ask, like, how do I get enlightened? But this was a second-order question. It was, having resolved to become perfectly enlightened, how do I purify the Buddha land? Which is a kind of social, cosmological, political, altruistic question, really, rather than so much a self-development question, And that is the question on which the Vimalakirti, turns, is that question, how do we make this a Buddha land, I nowadays call it a Buddhaverse, because we have universe, so Buddhaverse, I prefer that. Universe turns into one. We're all in universes where everything turns into ourselves, that is, our one self, unfortunately, usually. And one thing cannot be infinity. Infinity is not one, Infinity cannot be one. There's no one infinity, because infinity is not an entifiable thing that can be then measured. Here's one and there's another. Infinity is infinite. Therefore, it's never encompassable, and therefore it defies oneness, infinity, as well as multiplicity. So So we always think of one infinity, but that's a mistake. So Buddhaverse, anyway. So it's everything that turns into enlightenment, a realm where everything turns into enlightenment. So how do we perfect? Purify means also perfect under the sense of not newly make, but actually reveal the underlying Buddhaversal nature of things. Since everything is a Buddhaverse, how do we purify our misperception or failure to perceive it, something like that? That's the question, anyway. So then Buddha takes those jewel parasols that they offered, and he performs a miraculous transformation of energies where suddenly everyone sees the whole world enfolded in a great canopy, like a planetarium. When I was trying to translate it, I was trying to figure out what a canopy like that would be. This was a canopy that covered the entire billion world galactic universe, to translate the Buddhist expression. 3,000 great thousand galaxy, galactic universe. So a canopy that went around the whole galaxy. And then in that canopy, people could see everything in the galaxy, all the living beings, not just this planet Earth, but all the planet Earths, because there are many planet Earths, many realms of heavens, many realms of Brahma deities, many realms of Indra deities, many Olympuses, many hells, many crocodiles, many dragons, many sea monsters. People could see all of them in all the different realms, reflected all interpenetratingly. Somehow seeing that all of the infinite reality was all interconnected with their present situation. And he first did that as a piece of performance art, just to get them psyched up, And then they asked that question, then they praised him for that, Ratnakara, thank you. Ratnakara praised him for that and said some lovely hymns, He said, leader, bull of men, human bull, man bull, we behold the revelation of your miracle. That was an epithet of the Buddha, Purusharshabha. The superb and radiant fields of the Sugatas, the Bliss Lords, that is the name of the Buddha, the Bliss Lords appear before us, and your extensive spiritual teachings that lead to immortality make themselves heard throughout the whole reach of space, etc. They praise him about this wonderful vision. And then they say, Lord, these 500 young Lichavis are truly on their way to unexcelled perfect enlightenment, and they have asked, what is the Bodhisattva's purification of the Buddha field? Please, Lord, explain to them the Bodhisattva's purification of the Buddha field. And then he does. The Buddha does. He says, very good question, young man. Your question to the Tathagata, the transcendent Buddha, about the purification of the Buddha field is good. Therefore, I will explain it to you. And he goes on explaining how great the universe is, how great the Buddhaverse is. After first saying that, in fact, one thing you must understand about the Buddha field, the Buddhaverse, is that it is not a bunch of rocks. It is not a bunch of just stones and hydrogen atoms and what have you. A Buddha field, a Buddhaverse of Bodhisattvas springs from the aims of living beings. A Buddhaverse is a collective mind field of living beings, not just human beings, I must say, but living beings. That includes gods. Don't ever believe that Buddhism is atheistic. Buddha knew the gods. He talks to them. He knows them. He just doesn't think any one of them is that big a deal. He thinks they're a little bit, puffed up, a lot of them, unfortunately. They tend to get, you could understand it if you were a god. You roll around in some universe, lives and dies over it, and you pretty big stuff, Transgalactic, whatever, you don't need a spaceship. And but they still are a little too egotistical from the Buddha's perspective. They don't understand this strange thing to understand about the boundary of self and other, which is where enlightenment lies. They're just big and strong and powerful and cosmic and galactic, etc. And they're a little foolish. So, but Buddhism is theistic. They believe in these gods. In fact, Buddha works with the gods. Once Buddha becomes enlightened, the gods become his foremost disciples. Brahma, the creator of India, is his main disciple. Buddha will not teach the world if Brahma doesn't ask him to. Brahma is like Jehovah, same. Don't think that he left out some people over there in Arabia. Mount Sinai, whatever. And since the gods can travel around, they don't just sit on their dinky little mountains. They found Buddha, and he talked with them. And they were especially happy about Buddha, because they're sick and tired of everybody blaming it all on them. And they said, here's someone has realized we didn't actually make the whole thing, and we don't know what's where it goes. And we're just the big shots in here, We're like we live up on the Palisades here, or whatever it is, We're the big guys, And we don't really know how to take care of everybody. And we feel responsible, actually, and we feel guilty. And then we know that people hate our guts. When they lose their child, their only child, when they lose their loved one, when they lose their mate, when they lose their own lives, they sit back and shake their fists. Say, you son of a gun, you could have made it nice. You could have landed me in Palm Springs for another 10 years. What is this? And it's not their fault. They can't control that real estate. And then the Buddha comes along. And Buddha sees that, and he realizes they are as much victims of their own confusion as everybody else. And they're really relieved. And they say, get out there and tell those beings to lay off. Stop blaming us. Teach them. And so it is Brahma who comes, You'll see in all the ancient Buddhist paintings, it's Brahma himself, with his four faces looking in four directions, who comes and brings the wheel of Dharma to the Buddha, always. 1,000-spoked wheel of Dharma. He brings it where it's kept in the Brahma heaven. This wheel of Dharma, incredible thing with 1,000 spokes. He brings it and says, turn it. Go ahead. And then Buddha says, what's the use? Nobody will know what's going on. They won't. And then the Brahma then shows, he creates a vision for the Buddha of a great lotus pond. And then he shows that the sun rays come and to the different lotuses, and some of them open, and some of them don't quite open, and some of them wait and open the next day. And he says, beings are like that. They won't all maybe immediately understand, but in the long run they will, and they'll all blossom like that. So he gives a thing like that to encourage Buddha. And then Buddha is like a prima donna, and he keeps saying, I won't. He makes Brahma go to more and more lengths to ask him. And then Indra has to come. The Indra is like Zeus, Olympus' thunder bearer, And Indra comes, and he starts handing over some things and saying, please, please, please. So Buddha really plays it up. He knows very well he's going to give his teaching, but he makes the gods really get into it before he does. And then he talks about this Buddhaverse anyway, and he says that he makes an amazing thing, about how should one wish to, for example, when he says that the Buddhaverse of Bodhisattva springs from the aims of living beings, he then says, for example, Ratnakara, a jewel mine, which is the name of his main interlocutor, he says, should one wish to build in empty space, one might go ahead, in spite of the fact that it is not possible to build or to adorn anything in empty space. In just the same way, should a bodhisattva who knows full well that all things are like empty space wish to build a Buddha field, a Buddhaverse, in order to develop living beings, he might go ahead, in spite of the fact that it is not possible to build or to adorn a Buddha field in empty space. And then after sort of first setting a foundation of voidness, and setting the fact that in a way it's impossible to build a Buddhaverse, not because there is no such thing as a Buddhaverse, but because this already is a Buddhaverse. So it's not a matter of building one from scratch, it's a matter of revealing the one that is here. But he said, Bodhisattva doesn't care. Bodhisattva wants to go in the mode of building one, even if he knows or she knows that maybe Buddha already built one. But it's as long as it doesn't look like one to me, I want to build one type of thing. That's the Bodhisattva's wish. Because a Buddhaverse, you see, is so great. You can relax in a Buddhaverse if you're a Bodhisattva. It's the only place you can relax, you see. Because if you're a Bodhisattva, you take this vow for all beings to be happy, then they're all having a horrible time, all of those beings. They're all so then you always got to try to make them be happy because you have that vow, you see. So then a Buddhaverse is a land where you don't have to bother with it because the ground itself makes them be happy, you see. The air, the winds make them be happy. There's like a thunderbolt and a clap of thunder, and it says impermanence, It's the cloud itself speaks to the beings, so that's what a Buddhaverse does. It all works to liberate and evolve and develop and delights living beings, a Buddhaverse does. So when you've made a whole land that does it automatically, it's like you've made a movie. You just turn it on and it plays. People like it. It's like the universe becomes that movie that entertains everybody. Lifts them towards enlightenment. So that's why you want to make a Buddhaverse. You see, but then you know that it's empty. Then you go ahead. Then Buddha goes on. He says a Buddhaverse of a Bodhisattva is a field of positive thought. Adhyashaya. Positive thought means that we never give up the will to make something good in the world. That's sort of the key of, she mentioned my book, the real title of my book before the press got a hold of it, and it's okay, I think they did the right thing, but it was really the politics of enlightenment. But they made me change it because they said, well, nobody even thinks there is such a thing. And they won't, a few fanatics might get it, but people won't be drawn to it because they'll think that's hopeless. Politics of enlightenment. What is this? Politics is a bunch of crap. You can't have politics of enlightenment. So, but that's what politics of enlightenment is. It's based on positive thought. Positive thought, adhyasaya, means that you don't give up. It is not the art of the possible, real politics. It's the art of the impossible. What's the use of the art of the possible? You don't need art, you just slap it together, The impossible, you need art for what's impossible, because you don't give up that people can all be fed. You don't give up that there's enough to share for everybody. You don't give up that the KKK Dirkwits will actually realize how beautiful people of other races are and other religions are and so forth, and stop burning churches, etc. You don't give up that we can pass a bill in the legislature that says that any county that allows anybody to burn somebody's church, they have to rebuild that church out of their taxes. And they have to do it immediately, or all the other counties will boycott their frontiers and barriers and things. That would be a good bill, I think. They would then stop these drunken teenagers going out trying to impress them, wearing a white sheet and running around burning down churches. They're burning them like mad still, It's kept out of the press, but it happens all the time. So positive thought means that you don't give up on anybody. Even Stalin, even Mao Zedong, even Hitler. You don't give up on them. Hitler died. He's roasting someplace in some oven where he doesn't have even the luxury of dying. He just has to stay roasting there. He's got another million neons or two sizzling away. A little Hitler burger. And you don't give up anyway. You say, no, it's enough. He's had a half an hour. That would be enough of that for anybody. And you get him out of there, And you send him to permanent, Zendo, You have to sweep the Zendo forever. So he encounters his own ugly mustache. And so positive thought means you never give up. And so it says, when the Bodhisattva attains enlightenment, living beings free of hypocrisy and deceit will be reborn in his Buddhaverse, because the land itself is made of positive thought. Bodhisattva's Buddhaverse is a field of high resolve. High resolve means, messianic determination. We will make all beings happy. There will be no one without exception who will be left out of the Buddhaverse, When she attains enlightenment, living beings who have harvested the two stores of merit and wisdom and have planted the roots of virtue will be born in her Buddhaverse. A Bodhisattva's Buddhaverse is a field of virtuous application. Anyway, he goes on. It's a field of samadhi. It's a field of wisdom. It's a field of the 10 virtues. When a Bodhisattva attains enlightenment, living beings who are secure in long life, great in wealth, chaste in conduct, enhanced by true speech, soft-spoken, free of divisive intrigues, adroit in reconciling factions, enlightening in their conversations, free of envy, free of malice, and endowed with perfect views of the nature of reality, will be born in his Buddhaverse. Those are the tenfold, virtuous things, and the positive way. There's a negative 10 commandments. You all know that, and a positive one. You know that. The Buddhist 10 prohibitions and 10 injunctions. Don't kill, don't steal, don't commit sexual misconduct, don't lie, don't speak harshly, don't speak divisively, don't speak stupidly, frivolously, don't have malice, don't have greed, and don't have a distorted view of the nature of reality, such as the view that there is no life after death, for example. There's a popular one around here. So, he goes on. He sort of rolls the whole Buddha Dharma, all of the different types of meditations and practices and ethics and insights into physics and so forth and sciences. He puts them all in here, and he finally says, the purity of his Buddhaverse reflects the purity of living beings. The purity of the living beings reflects the purity of her intuitive wisdom. The purity of her intuitive wisdom reflects the purity of her teaching. The purity of his teaching reflects the purity of his transcendental practice. And the purity of his transcendental practice reflects the purity of her own mind. So that's where the Buddha land is in the purity of the Buddha land, the Buddhaverse of the Bodhisattva is in the purity of his own mind, her own mind. He says to the questioner Ratnakara, and then Shariputra, thinks what you are all thinking, which is, if the Buddha, Shakyamuni, had a pure mind as a Bodhisattva and made this Buddhaverse, the universe Saha, where we live, into his Buddhaverse, which is a land of pure generosity and pure this and that and the other, since it is so impure, since it is so imperfect, since there are so many holocausts, since there are so many innocent deaths, since there are so many unnecessary accidents and earthquakes and El Niños and horrible situations and wars and landmines amputating and maiming people and poison gases and what have you, and idiotic domestic violence all over the planet. And since there's so much of this on the planet, how could the Buddha's mind have been pure? What kind of bodhisattva was he? What a schlub he must have been, thinks Shariputra, the head monk. You know, the Osho, Shariputra's like the Osho, you know. So he's thinking this to himself, the Buddha sucks, man. What a crappy Buddha land. He made this Buddha land, like, ooh, smells to high heaven. So poor guy, Buddha reads his mind. Shariputra, is it the fault of sun and moon that those blind from birth cannot see them? And he says, no, but it's not their fault. Poor guy should know what's coming. And he says, just so, Shariputra. It is not my fault or the fault of my Buddhaverse that you, Shariputra, and other beings who are indulging in their delusions about what they think is real, thinking that all of this imperfection, all of this injustice, all of this violence and sadness and sorrow and suffering, and the fundamental problem of all of us that we feel we are a separated, isolated being, and we are versus the universe. When we're really in our super realistic mode, we really think that. I mean, of course we don't feel versus, we think I have my loved ones, I have my family, I have my people, I have my country, I have my president, he's on my side, my senator, my congressman. Well, no, few, not so much that we think that, do we? Anyway, we think we have somebody on our side in our more light moments, but in our real moments, we really feel here we are, all hidden away here, terrified and frightened. I was thinking, you know, this morning I woke up thinking, I had said how frightened we were, but I didn't even remember that we were really even frightened to jump into an ice-cold crystal stream. Go to Sahara and you look at that water. And you think, you walk up there happily with your bathing suit, whatever, ready to jump in, and then you wish you hadn't come and people weren't looking at you. And you know what a shock it's going to be when you hit you. You're frightened. Maybe I'll have a heart attack. I jump into that, like, what is it, 45-degree water, whatever it is. We're actually frightened to put our foot into a little stream, something we even know is going to be joyful. We're going to feel like bubbling crystals once we go through the shock, as long as the heart keeps beating. And yet we're terrified to jump in it. We're terrified of everything. Terrified to cast a vote. Terrified to speak up in a group when we see some people delivering some BS. Someone will arrest us. So the fundamental thing that it's us versus the universe and we're losing. That's the fundamental thing. You know, how can this therefore be a Buddha land? You know? So then the Buddha does this thing. This is the edge of the millennium. You know, Buddha puts his foot on the ground. They don't actually say if he's sitting or standing or what he is. Oh, he's sitting. Yeah. So I guess he puts his foot down like this, sitting on a lion throne. They say that's right, like a mountain and so forth. Sat upon a majestic lion throne to teach the Dharma. So he was sitting and he put his toe down, his big toe. The minute he put his big toe down, everyone present suddenly saw the place. Thereupon the Lord touched the ground with his this billion world galactic universe with his big toe. And suddenly it was transformed into a huge mass of precious jewels, a magnificent array of many hundreds of thousands of clusters of precious gems, until it resembled the universe of the Tathagata Ratna Vyuha, which means jewel array, called Ananta Guna Ratna Vyuha, the infinite array of jeweled excellence. Everyone in the entire assembly was filled with wonder, each perceiving himself or herself seated on a throne of jeweled lotuses. It's sort of like the ultimate zendo, I always like to say. You know. But you have a jeweled zafu, you know. What? No, because you're made of jewel, you know. And even the distraction is samadhi, you know. There's no problem. And you don't even have, you know, as Sasaki Roshi said, everything is, even your pee is jeweled pee, you know, and jeweled caca, you know, and you don't even have to get up. You don't have to have toilets and worry about the low flush water and the whole thing. And you don't have to wash, and the air is filled with jeweled energy and so forth. And so you're just totally in a situation of total samadhi, and there's no obstacle. There's no obstacle. Everything in your mind is a symphony of insight, you know. That's what they meant by jeweled lotus and jewel. Your body is jeweled plasma, you know. And, you know, if you have like any kind of, you know, ducks or things, they're just jeweled Dharma ducks, you know, and they come by and they go quack, you know. This is described in Buddha land thing. And the quack says selflessness, voidness, all things are devoid of intrinsic reality because they are totally interrelated. They just speak the Avatamsaka Sutra, they speak the Prajnaparamita Sutra, they speak the Kalachakra Tantra. There's absolutely no problem in such a Buddha land. And Shariputra sees that, and then they say to Shariputra, they say, what do you think, Shariputra? How does it look? Do you see the splendor of the virtues of the Buddhaverse? And Shariputra says, I see it, Lord. Here before me is a display of splendor such as I never before heard of or beheld. And the Buddha says, Shariputra, this Buddhaverse is always thus pure. But the transcendent Lord makes it appear to be spoiled by many faults in order to bring about the maturity of inferior, low-minded, inferiority complexed living beings, really, you should really say. Like Bucky Fuller used to say very rightly, we have this inferiority complex, which now in this stage of our power on this planet as human beings is totally being self-fulfilled. We have this complex that we can't, the life sucks and the planet sucks and we can't have enough for everybody, and we won't stay here forever, so we cook up some ideology that only has to last for so and so long, and then we're going to wreck it just in time. And so he said, Shariputra, this Buddha field is always thus pure, but the transcendent Lord, the Tathagata, makes it appear to be spoiled by many faults in order to bring about the maturity of inferiority complex living beings. For example, Shariputra, well, he gives some examples, some cosmological things we wouldn't get necessarily, but the point is that and then also in the same thing, Brahma, God, comes and says to Shariputra, yeah, this is really a perfect world, Shariputra. I can see it as perfect. God says. So again, this, don't say Buddhism is atheistic. There's God right there, Brahma. He says, Shariputra, he scolds him in between before he has the vision. He says, don't say that the Buddhaverse of the Tathagata is impure. Shariputra, the Buddhaverse of the Tathagata is pure. I see the splendid expanse of that Buddhaverse of Lord Shakyamuni as equal to the splendor of, for example, the abode of the highest deities. Imagine what Jerry Falwell would do if God came down and said, don't say this is a bad planet. I see this planet as this perfect, beautiful Buddhaverse of Buddha Shakyamuni. Poor Jerry. Satan is busy. But that's what that is. So that is God in that culture. Brahma is God. Brahma is Jehovah. And he's talking. He's an actor in the Buddhist sutras, in the Buddhist mythos, in the Buddhist reality. So there we are. That's the setting. Okay, that's our millennium setting. The planet has already been. Beings on our planet have perceived that setting throughout the civilizations of Asia, from then till now. They weren't waiting for this or for that. The kingdom of God, the kingdom of Buddha, that's the same thing. The kingdom of God is the Buddhaverse. That's the same thing. It's within you. It is there. There's no difference. And the mode of having millennial consciousness, apocalyptic consciousness, is really actually a socially suppressed thing ever since these things happened. Everybody would have had that vision, because in that vision, everything is an advantage for your evolution. Why aren't we on lifelong retreat ourselves? And that doesn't have to be defined necessarily in some macho, militaristic, ascetic way. Lifelong retreat could be with the family. It's easier with being a monk or a nun, but it could be with the family. It could be in a paradise. It could be on Tahiti. It doesn't have to be in some cold, shivering place in some way. It doesn't have to be all alone and so forth. We're all alone anyway, ultimately, because we could all die at any moment, making us all alone. In some cosmic way, we all are all alone. Even we are most beloved, in the most beloved matrix of friendship and family, we're still alone, because we can die at any moment, and then no one will be going with us through that. No normal being will. And so, why aren't we on that retreat? Because why? I'm not, because I gotta finish, I gotta earn my living, I gotta teach this, I gotta finish building that institution, I gotta finish that book, I gotta finish the house. Still trying to finish my house 30 years later, nailing away. My kids are so sick of it. There he goes again, he's hammering away. And then after that, I'm gonna meditate in that house. We'll have a retreat. I'll be dead, but that's okay. It'll be ready. So why are we wasting, the house, I'll die. The body, I'll die. Oh yeah, I'll have that retreat after I become an adept yogi. I'm going to go do yoga. I'm going to go pump up and join the health club. And then I'll be fine. I'll have a retreat and my body will be dead. We're always finishing something, aren't we? We've got some other duty, obligation, something. This is why monastic life in the Buddhist civilization is not a bummer. It's not a downer. It's not a big withdrawal. It's like a huge escape from an immense number of anxieties. It's called an escape. We say ordained, but ordained is not from Asian languages. Ordained comes from Western monastic language being transposed to be the equivalent of an Eastern monastic thing. The Eastern monastic thing is not ordained, it is graduate, liberate, escape. Get exemption. It's like a tax exemption. Don't you love tax exemptions when you get them? It's like an exemption. The Reverend Venerable Abbess conferred exemption on 40 people. Whoa, that would change our attitude. We'd be right. Hey, I'll have one. Give me an exemption. I've been trying to get exempt for a long time. I keep paying and paying. I want an exemption. But that's the language of exemption. Because when you lay life, what is lay life? Sure, you have like a few like juicy moments here and there, like once a week, maybe once a month. Like 40 years ago, we had one, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. The rest of the time, it's like pay, earn, work, get up, ignore that pain, take an aspirin, Ecotrin. Then when you get older, then they give you little coated ones. They get these old actors out there. Can't even cure your arthritis. Exemption means you get out of all of this problem, a lot of it. The world supports you. You get life, I like to say, lifelong MacArthur Fellowship. Just be monk or nun. And you don't have that one thing, that genitally organized orgasm. And you can reverse and you can have like eros, libido, flowing in your tanka painting, circulating in your samadhi. You don't have to have it organized that way. It's not even that good a way, as any like libertine will tell you. So read the Kama Sutra. Even the Kama Sutra is not just some sort of playboy thing. They talk about having a party and like what kind of calling card you give and which bouquet. And diffuses all throughout life, Bliss does. You withdraw from that habitual, socially programmed, productive, supposedly, enhancing the collective, subordinating of your individual desire, actually, really. It's a delusion that you're giving something up. You're giving up a delusion. So why aren't we doing that? Because we think the world is so imperfect. If we did it and we think we are so imperfect. What, me attain enlightenment? Me? No, wait, I got to plant this field here. I got to make my next million. I got to watch my investments. And I'll give some of it to some enlightened people. That'll get them great. But I couldn't attain enlightenment. I'm just a businessman. I'm just a chauffeur. I'm a driver. I'm a gardener. Not me, no. And I'm so humble too. Isn't that nice? Meanwhile, any human being has a brain that is like mad. It's being so underutilized. The brain is like it's little wet things, like little like pieces of like slimy coral are flapping in the breeze, waiting for some energy to go through it. Sitting there like lost over here in this part of the sky, like bloop bloop bloop. Come on, I want to get into some action. And you guys have like a software program and just sort of runs it up and down the middle. You don't go into all the juicy folds. And like feel something new and think of something different and think of like universal, like multi-dimensional orientations. Sit around and look and like work and pull some lever somewhere so you can buy a microchip, Pentium 2 processor, and then sit there and go bleep bleep for life. Instead of like using me, I'm a microchip. The whole brain is jumping up and flapped down and shouted Steve Jobs, Come on, you're distracting people from using us. I love my computer, though. So it was my baby. Has like 2 gigabytes of like blah blah in there. So anyway, my point is that millennial consciousness is a consciousness that recognizes immediately. Because, then Buddha, he had his foot like that. He put his toe like that. Everybody saw a perfect place. And at first they went, oh, great, everything's fine. Then they realized they were not the ones making it like that, that they were sort of being buoyed up for a minute, that they didn't still even understand where they were quite. They still didn't really feel part of that blissful jewel thing. It was just this amazing thing. It shattered for a moment their sense of the intrinsic concreteness of their crappy world that they were in. This terrible one, and being a terribly maladapted, ill-fitted being in this terrible, hostile, dangerous, frightening world. Temporarily that was suspended and they felt kind of a gushy oneness with it for a second. So that self-indulgence is really not such a danger. It's just that then, the world is perfect. It has all this energy. I have to worry about nothing more to worry about. I don't have to worry about where the next meal is going. I don't have to worry about what's happening. Everyone else all my loved ones are also installed in their perfect evolutionary throne. And all I can do is now focus on what is me, what is reality, what is this world. I have to come into attunement with it. I have to fully unfold my awareness of it. I have to realize the space-like equipoised samadhi, the illusion-like aftermath samadhi, the total selflessness of person and thing, the complete mutual interfusion of all things. That's all I have to do is sit and samadhify that. That's what you realize in millennial consciousness, because everything else is too boring. You want this deepest pleasure. Then the brain, you really want to put it to work. The brain becomes this incredible chamber which processes everything. And you can, every cell becomes an eye. It's like, have a look at this far with his hands, 1,000 hands with eyes in the palms, Every cell, every pore sees everything. We actually are beings like that. We're moving, we're polymorphously, intuitively, perversely, intensely wise. We can know everything with every fingertip. We can be everything. And that's what you do in millennial consciousness. You just open yourself. That's what the purpose of your life is. Totally open yourself. Totally be exalted. Be part of the energy that is the exaltation of everything and everyone. Be bliss. And be bliss that is sort of so compelling within all beings and all things that it just helps them, encourages them to unfold the bliss from within themselves. And that's all there is worth doing. That's the meaning of being there when you have this millennial insight. But then, Buddha picked up his foot. And it looked like crap again to everybody. Then it's more complex. How do we do it when yet our delusion is still our way of seeing? We're still narrowed down, We're oriented just to seeing this direction. And we have this preconcept, and our orientation is not just the fact that we have eyes that only look one way. We only see with eyes. We don't see with our elbow. We only see this one way. It isn't just that. It's that our whole orientation is narrowly constricted. Because we're in this place where we feel this so much, the feedback is so dangerous, so difficult. And we have come from forms of life where our armoring against the other, self versus other, has been so much more drastic. Where really other is perceived as a giant mouth that wants to devour us. And we are trying to be as big a mouth as we can to devour as much of it as we can to sort of try to get some sort of support on our side. We've been this kind of a life form, you see. And so the revolutionary opening is more complicated than the whole of Vimalakirti Sutra, the whole of Buddha's teaching, and this more open Mahayana teaching, is how can you evolve beings? How can we do this evolution? How to maximize and make it as rapid as possible, that's the Buddha's interest, you see. In a way, Buddha has no interest. When you feel this kind of feeling, you don't care to do anything. You're not trying to get anywhere. You're not trying to do anything. In a way, as I said last night, as inconceivable as it seems to us, you already are everywhere. Already. You're in all future moments already. All different, multiple universe possible future moments. Because time has become, you're not anymore assenting to the appearance of the concreteness of time. You're no more assenting to the appearance of the concreteness of matter. You're no more assenting to the apparent concreteness of yourself. You still perceive it, But now you see it like when you see an illusion. When we go to the movies, we see some action happening there, and we can get drawn in, we can weep, we can shrink in horror. We can freak out totally. I always do. My kids love to sneak up to me in a fierce movie. Whenever they can drag me against my will to some kind of horror thing or frightening thing, suspense thing, Silence of the Lambs. They come in and when Jodie Foster's in the cellar in the dark there, they come and they love to put a popcorn in my hand just at the moment. And then I go, I guess the popcorn goes there. It's one of their favorite things. And they laugh. Especially my one son likes to do that. My second son. It's his favorite thing. The daddy geyser, It's when daddy just loses himself in the action and then freaks, and the popcorn goes over everybody in the audience. So far, he's never put a big Coke in my hand. Thank God. Thank goodness. It's his compassion for me. So this is the question, how to open the beings. Oh yeah, if you were a being who was a Buddha, although you don't care about anything, and although you for yourself, and although you are completely undisturbed in bliss, and in fact you can be aware of beings in hell actually, and because it's a kind of virtual reality, you at the same time are completely outraged by that agony, and you insist and determine, and even Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, goes in, and that's one of his jobs. And Kshitigarbha, Jizo, I'm sure you have Jizo in here. And Jizo, that's Jizo's big job. Why the Japanese love Jizo? Jizo's job is he's down there freezing hell over all the time. When hell freezes over, that's his job. He goes down there freezing. He has a big truck that emanates ice. He drives through all the hells. So it isn't that they do everything they can to prevent them, but still it's a virtual reality for them, these hells in a way. But not for the beings in them. They know those beings are all freaked out. They've gone into their ultimate paranoia, a state of being compressed, of them versus the universe, and the universe winning. And it's crushing them and grinding them to the ultimate way, they think, because that's their drama. And the Buddha knows that it's unreal for him, but it's real for them. And yet still there's bliss there. Even a being in such a state is just twisted themselves out of recognizing that they have bliss in the core of their cell and being, and every piece of the agony is still bliss. I know that's a very weird concept, but that is the way it is if you're a Buddha, apparently. So therefore, even that doesn't discourage you. And even that, then you don't pretend also that other beings cannot have the horizon of infinite self-torture. In spite of the fact that you see them as blissful. And then imagine how frustrating it might be, even within a virtual reality, within a film. How deeply engaged you can become in a film. And especially if you felt you were the film. And you were the beings that were torturing each other. Don't you hate tragedies? I hate them. People say, I want to go see some tragedy. All this comedy is a bad sign in our culture. We should all get out there and grovel in tragedy. Let's have some more unhappy endings. You get this from art critics. Bunch of masochists. I hate them. There you are, and she's so beautiful, and he's so beautiful, and then they're taking the poison, and she thinks he's dead, and he takes the poison. And God, they could have gone and they could have won the World Olympic ice dancing. They could have had a fabulous time, and they're poisoning themselves. Because some stupid Capulets and Montagues who should all be put in the Zendo for a few years. Should have sent Roshi back in time to Florence or Verona, wherever it was, to straighten them out. Bunch of morons in there. I hate tragedy. So when you get in there, you really hate it. You see how you can help. There's the bad guy there. Wait, there he is. Get him. And they don't listen to you, and they do it, and bam, they kill each other, and then at the end, And you're supposed to feel better about the fact that you're living and getting being paid a living wage and being taxed to death and having your country ruined. I don't like that tragedy stuff. Supposed to inure us to the crappy way they treat us, the authorities in our world, and treat our fellows. And brainwash us that we have to treat our fellows that way. We have to step over them in the doorways there in order to get to our restaurant and have our polenta with whatever it is. We just step over those guys. They train us that's what, if I took him in with me, there'd be no polenta for nobody. BS. It's Plenty of polenta. They throw it away. They put nitrite oxide in it. They I don't know what they do with it. They turn it into plastic face masks so they can sell it to gorillas. I mean, they're just nuts. So they send us to tragedy. So then Buddha is sitting there in this tragedy. He even tells everybody, look, if you're going to be you versus the universe, you're going to insist on you're the real thing, you're going to have a tragedy endlessly. He tells you that. Ha ha, he says. He's still smiling. He says, if you insist on being ignorant, if you insist on you're it versus everything else, then you'll lose and you'll always suffer. You'll die. You'll lose your loved ones. You'll meet your enemies. You'll be sick. You'll get old. You'll be reborn then afterwards in an unpleasant manner. You'll live in lower realms where beings are just chomping on each other all the time. You're not going to have a good time if you insist that you're it. You have to see through that. Then you can have a happy time. So, but I mean, what I was trying to say was, imagine a being like a Buddha. Imagine like how we can be when we would empathize, when we would be able to feel that everyone else is us. You know that you can do that because you've been in love, all of you. You've had a child, all of you. Or you adopted one, or you were one. You've all had moments where you have just been out of your own skin. And you really could feel another being and delighted in that. You've all felt that way. Some moment you have. And therefore you know that that's possible. And therefore you know you can't say, even though you don't really believe there is such a thing as a Buddha. It's not that easy to do. You can't, oh yeah, oh sure, I know there's a Buddha. No way, we don't know that. Who do you think he is? Some guy who wandered around in India. It's a little bit of a male chauvinist, didn't want to have nuns, went around, maybe he quit smoking, something. Forget that. A Buddha doesn't mean some guy wandering around in there. Buddha means this being who fell in love with all beings in the universe in that way. So much that he felt them. He felt himself as them. And you have done that. You have felt yourself as another. And you have delighted in that. Simultaneously still being yourself. You've had those moments. And therefore you cannot categorically say that it is impossible that someone could fall in love with all beings and feel him or herself as all beings. And feel yet still him or herself. Apparently when you do that, that's so intense that then you're not content to just be yourself. So you feel yourself as all beings, then you can be many beings interacting with those all beings. That's what the theory of emanation is in Buddhism, in Mahayana Buddhism. The theory of the nirmanakaya, the emanation. It's like you have your fantasy to be many beings, to interact with many beings, becomes possible. Because you can't bear when you feel, because why? You feel yourself as beings, you feel the bliss in their cells, in every element of their nerves, in their atoms you feel it. In the quantum forces within their embodiments you feel it. And then you see them, and are they aware of it? Are they enjoying it? No, they're like, you see them all knotted up against themselves. You see them all clamped up inside, cutting off their own sensitivity. You see their brain just sort of completely neglected except for one central channel of go, forward, left turn, exit 44. Meanwhile and worry because they're at hurtling metal, They could be ripped their body apart if they just misdrive slightly, so they don't want to sense too much. Imagine what you would want to do, feeling their feeling from inside, to open up their feeling from inside to themselves. But then how frustrating, because you have to do something, that you can't sort of explode them from inside with bliss. Just sort of be a bliss energy in their atoms and just explode. You can't do that. They would feel like they were having like the alien was coming out. Or this thing, in those horror movies, They would feel like some sort of eruption, some horrible thing was happening, and they'd have a fit, have a heart attack or something. So instead, what do you have to do? You have to become a Buddha. Sit there and talk, put your toe on the ground. Blah, blah, blah. You're not the center of the universe. Oh, the universe could be great if you just relax and be loving and don't be angry. Don't be intolerant. Don't be stupid. Understand what you are. Use yourself. To the humans, anyway, you talk like that. To the animals, you do something else. To the gods, you do something else. You interact with all life in that way. Imagine what a strong energy you'd have to do that. Just think about it. How strongly will you act when you really love someone and they hurt themselves and you really love them? What are you capable of doing? You can die happily. Your child is suffering, agonizing, or you see like a crushing thing coming at them, you will fling yourself in the way. Your lover, you will do that when you're still hot. Before you're disillusioned. You will, if you really love, you will. Love, we can do that. We can transcend. It will just take us right out of our body. Love will. We've all had the experience or the taste. And therefore, we cannot say that there is not a being that loves every being like that. You see, theists think that way. The faithful, pious, the great theistic saint thinks that way. That's why they talk about the love of God, the love of Jesus, that they mean that. That's why. I think that from a Buddhist point of view, psychologically, they have a hard time sometimes going a certain direction with it, because if you add to that the idea that that deity could make it different where you wouldn't suffer and no one else would suffer, but doesn't, there's something that stops the power of the love a little bit, like the idea that the beloved is a big, mean, nasty pain in the ass because he could make the world better and doesn't. You know what I mean? It a little bit turns down the valve. And that's why Buddha is like, I didn't make it. And that's why God even supports Buddha to say that. Yes, tell him, I didn't make it. It's not my fault. You don't have to hate someone, because, that's when we hate people, isn't it? When someone comes and beats us up, some policeman with a stick, or some fascist, or some torturer, or some wife abuser, or husband abuser, or child abuser, we don't hate the stick, the whip that they hit us with. We don't hate the bone in their hand. We don't hate the finger joints. We don't hate the shoulder, the arm. We hate what we think is their person that chooses to hurt us. To we attribute the agency, you see. So if we attribute the agency of our suffering to a person who has omnipotent power over us, we're going to hate that person. We can't help it. So that's why God was happy about Buddha. Is happy. God likes Buddha. Don't worry. They won't burn us at the stake. God won't let them. But he's happy about it. He doesn't want to be blamed. Big flood, Noah, come on. Kill everybody, make them, and then kill them all. Come on. That's some nasty, child abusers myth. Really. Some guy lived in a tent and we used to whip his camel and then went and whipped around the household. We don't need those myths. Or rather, we should reinterpret them better. We should go back up Mount Sinai and have a little chat with the bush. Really. Okay, you can burn your bush commandments. We love them. They're great. Tell these people that, that there's no big boss like that. And therefore, they can't behave around the house like a big boss or around the temple. Tell them that. I'm sure he'll be happy to one of these days. I expect him to show up on top of the Kaaba. The really fierce form of it, of course, is only in the Kaaba. The rest of the Abrahamic guys have kind of cooled out, except for a couple of real fanatics. But in the Kaaba, it's still widespread. I expect him to show up on top of the Kaaba. Say, Allah al-Rahman. That means compassionate. Don't give me this other big macho business. Having 200 wives. Female genital mutilation. Don't give us that. We don't want to hear about that. I'm sick and tired of you people doing that in my name. Imagine God. Allah must be pissed off. If he has this total all-pervading awareness. Millions of clitori and labia are thrown in the trash on his name by a bunch of male chauvinist idiots. I'm sorry. I can't help myself. But I believe that. So, it's just such a thing against feeling, against human feeling, against human sensitivity. It's intolerable. We cannot tolerate it on this planet. It is not necessary. Millennial consciousness. So this is the drive, anyway, that gives the energy to the enlightened beings to provide to us the methods of opening out our own sensitivity in this way. Any questions?
The Bob Thurman podcast is brought to you in part through the generous support of the Tibet House US Menla membership community and listeners like you, and is distributed through a Creative Commons No Derivatives license. Please feel free to share, like, and post on your favorite social media platform. Tashi Delek, and thanks for tuning in.